Hey everyone, welcome back to OnBase. I'm your host, Chris Moody. Today I'm very excited to talk to Avishai Sharon on the art of ABM optimization. Avishai, thanks for joining us today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. A pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Well, I loved our prep call. We even spent a few minutes before we hit the record button today talking about this. But could you tell everyone a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, happy to. So hi, everybody. Avishai, co-founder and CEO at Trend Demon. We help companies optimize website experiences, primarily B2B and ABM marketers. And my personal journey actually started in a much different place. Started in the GIS, Geographic Information System space, where I dealt with navigation systems, mapping algorithms, all that stuff. And kind of life took me also into the marketing space of building websites in the digital marketing area. And that's kind of where I found a way to combine those two passions of data visualization, mapping, and navigation with B2B marketing. And the buyer journey kind of became that centerpiece. When I realized that when we're trying to understand buyer journeys, we're actually trying to understand something that's really much similar to a physical journey. And if we understand that effectively, we may have a chance of improving it and optimizing it. So that's kind of a long-winded way of mentioning of how I got here. Before running Trend Demon, I was leading a marketing agency that dealt with web development, website development, integrations. That was, started that 15 years ago when everything was just kind of fresh and, it was just the start of marketing automation. So I had the opportunity to see kind of all these different trends, technologies come into play, and how they're fitting together. And here we are today.
I love that. Let's talk about the problem a little first. I mean, I think you hit on it a little there about connecting data and storytelling and the journey. But we do know that many folks have account-based marketing that they may think is just some thing on the side, another tactic, another potential channel. What would you say to folks who think about it that way to set the stage for what you're working to solve?
So I think a big part of the frustration that companies have with marketing today is that things don't work. A lot of the things that, I grew up on to say, which was the classic demand gen playbooks and lead capturing, they're simply not effective. They're not working anymore. And so when we're trying to unpack why they're not working, we realize we're operating in a completely different environment from a buyer perspective. Buyers have all the power, all the control, remain anonymous, and that basically completely upends the process of, okay, let's get people to leave their contact information, then chase them or nurture them basically with more and more information. So that stuff doesn't work. We see this through the very low conversion rates from MQLs to pipeline. So that really is completely broken. And now the question is, so what do we do? So how do we move from here? We still need a process. We cannot just do marketing out of a gut, and we cannot just do things that are not accountable without any clear ROI. And I think ABM came in that really great moment that change of perspective also coincided with this diminishing returns on the classic lead gen. So ABM has really become the solution to how to address this big problem. And if we were just kind of still unpacking the problem and talking about that challenge that B2B marketers are facing, we're talking about increased anonymity. Buyers are not revealing themselves. We're talking about a diverse buying group. Again, the majority of it will not be known to the seller. And the other part, which is increasing, is our diminishing attention. We have such a few, such limited attention to new information, to new content, that if we're not really hitting that buyer at that exact time with relevant information, the chances they will just disengage. So these are the challenges. This is why a lot of it feels broken. but we're here to talk about solutions and what marketers can do and how they can address this. So try to give us some points of optimism also around that. And just before we talk maybe about that, just to give a sense of so I'm going to be sharing some information from our analysis and research. So we're tracking buyer journeys throughout the website, connecting them to pipeline and to business goals and to revenue. And that gives us an insight as to how B2B buyer journeys actually look like. And again, this is kind of why we are seeing all of these trends that I'm mentioning, and I'll share some more stats and benchmarks on kind of to color that data a bit more.
Yeah, I love that, and beautiful setup. Natural podcast host right there. I think, to your point, breaking through that attention span and some of the barriers we have to get attention, it always helps when we have real data, when you see the trends, when you know the insights. So what are some of the insights that you see are most effective for optimizing account-based strategies?
So let's start with understanding the buying group. I think that is fundamental of what we are trying to do, because at the end of the day, marketers and salespeople, their main role is to support the buyer journey, as opposed to a sales-led motion. We are now in a buyer-led motion. And so the main role of the whole go-to-market organization is to provide that seamless support and frictionless journey as much as possible. If we are doing our job correctly, we are saving our buyers time. And I think this should be probably the main benefit or the main advantage or the objective of any go-to-market organization. How do we save our potential buyers time in understanding what we can do for them and why they should engage with us? So just to share a few stats on that buying group from what we're seeing in our data. And also about the trends, right? So in 23, when we looked at the average buying group, and when we're talking about average, we're talking about companies that sell, that have a sales-led motion, and basically we're talking about ACVs of a few $100,000, right? So that's a typical kind of customer of ours. So that's the buying group. And the buying group in 23 was about 13 individual people visiting the website. Again, I'm not talking about pre and outside. Again, the external experience. Once they land on your website. So for companies who reach a pipeline opportunity, reached a deal stage, we're seeing 13 people. They spent about 51 sessions on the website, reading 81 pages. Now that seems like a lot. But then we kind of fast forward to 24, and in 2024 we saw a 35% decrease of those figures. So we're seeing 9 people from company on average. Again, everything else the same, right? Same group of companies, same buying groups to pipeline, but we're now seeing, instead of 51 sessions, 33 sessions per account, and only 54 pages read. And what that tells us is that we are even in a bigger challenge in terms of the race for attention. How do we capture the attention of that group? It's more diverse. It has less attention, and we want to be able to give it the relevant information to support their journey. Again, to streamline their journey as much as possible. So that's in terms of the composition of the buying group. In terms of conversion rates, maybe a point of optimism. So in 23, we saw 1.3% of inbound accounts, and we're talking about the account level, inbound accounts to the website, converting into pipeline. In 24, the first half of 24, we're seeing that 15% increase to 1.5%, 1.6%. So not big numbers, but we're starting to see the needle move into more and more companies exploring buying solutions and willing to invest, maybe potentially seeing some more, the economy starting to improve somewhat, and B2B companies looking at growth again and looking to buying more solutions. We're also, by the way, seeing this from the seller side. B2B marketers have invested 120% more in paid media in the first half of 24 compared to 23. It's a huge increase. We're also seeing 60% growth in organic traffic to the website. So we're starting to see these trends that could indicate we're starting to see this move away from the bear economy of the past 2.5 years to, I don't want to say bullish, but maybe a bit more positive outlook to growth and willing to invest in growth.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think so many organizations are trying to figure out what's the return of every single dollar. And that can restrict some of the spend we need to grow and to grow brand. And one of the things you and I had talked about was storytelling, which I think the fallacy there, many folks associate storytelling with the fluffy part of brand and the things that don't necessarily drive pipeline or help the company. But how do you think about storytelling and the role that it should play in demand generation to enhance the audience engagement?
I think that as we talked about the broken approach, right, which focused on capturing leads, the game today is about captivating audiences. And at the end of the day, us as humans are captivated by stories. We care about being successful in our roles. We care about things that will help us be successful. And that is that value that we are seeking when we are, again, opting in to read something, to listen to a podcast or watch a webinar or read a blog post. And I think this is now becoming a fundamental KPI that companies need to be aware of. Are we successfully captivating our target audiences in a recurring way? How do we quantify that? And to your point, how do we measure that in economic terms? Because at the end of the day, I can't come to the CFO and say, hey, look, we've done a great job storytelling or captivating audiences, right? I'm going to get kicked out of the boardroom. But we do need metrics. We do need numbers behind it. But we also, I think, need to educate leadership in terms of this new environment. It's not enough just to say, we influence just so-and-so, or we've driven so-and-so leads and so-so pipeline. But we have to educate up and down to our whole go-to-market organization and financial leadership and CEO to really understand that we are operating in a different environment where our ability as a company to tell a story to our audience, even if they're not ready to buy, is critical. And I think we all know the stat of only 5% are in the market, right? So what does it tell us? That the 95% are not relevant? I'd say they're the ones that are most relevant because the 5% have already made up their mind. They already know who they're going to buy from. Somebody else who may have done a better job, your competitor, has already built a relationship with them. And they're probably at that short list. If you're trying to just capture them, then you need to operate on the entire spectrum. It's important to, of course, understand intent, right? It's critical for marketing teams, sales teams to understand that. But it cannot be the only thing that the marketing of the GTM is focusing on. So storytelling in its broader sense of creating content that provides value, I think, is now this fundamental piece in go-to-market. It's not just from, let's say, an SEO perspective. I'm using this to generate traffic to my website. Or I'm doing this for just like you said, like some touchy-feely, fluffy, top-of-funnel objective. This is demand generation at its core. And I think this is something that more and more, the faster companies will realize that, they can start adjusting their perspective. And ABM plays a pivotal role in this new shift because it really takes the focus from leads to how are we influencing accounts? What are the touch points? What are those inflection points? And then converting that into KPIs. How many engaged accounts do we have month over month? How many intentful accounts do we have month over month? And these are metrics you can take to a CFO and you can say, look, we've done this. We have increased our engaged accounts score number. We have increased our intentful account numbers. And here we have the closing rates. And when you think about it, at the end of the day, the sales process is still pretty much has remained, I wouldn't say the same, but it still operates in the same manner, right? You have a company entering the pipeline, you have a support to that process, you want to give them as much as possible. It's the marketing part that I think is really broken down and needs to be completely overhauled and being understood better.
Great stuff there. I'm curious, when we talk about the sales audience, which you just hit on, what are some of the insights you're seeing from the data around adjustments that sales needs to make to deliver more value in a very competitive landscape?
So I think it relates back to this diminishing attention, the understanding that we have a diverse buying group, and the understanding of sales as their support process role. They are there to support a process, to streamline it as much as possible, to condense a lot of information, and to provide signal versus noise. And I think that's kind of why we see the best sales and the best account executives and sales reps are being those, like we always talked about, the trusted advisors, right? Those fundamentals haven't changed, but they have become, I think, a lot critical for the buying process. I think a fundamental shift that's also happening, which also is, what we're taught about from good salespeople, is the ability to listen. The need for the go-to-market organization to build listening capabilities across the board, from top of funnel to pipeline to customer success, right? All of that. But those listening capabilities to, let's say, literal or verbal signals and nonverbal signals. Is the content that I was sharing as a sales executive, as an account executive, is it resonating? It's important for me to find out. Or is it being shared? Is it being consumed? Is it supporting the decision process or not? And I think today those signals are much more important because we're much more in a listening, understanding mode than just projecting and sending information and pushing data or, kind of volume-based or quantity-based. A lot about the quantity of the engagement there. So I think that's evolving as well. I think good salespeople intuitively grasp that. They were always in that supporter advisor. I think now it's even more critical. So the gaps between the ones who are doing a good job versus those that don't is becoming just much wider.
Yeah, great stuff there. Let's tackle alignment. What recommendations or advice do you have for marketing and sales teams to better align around account-based effectiveness?
So I think it's, and I had numerous discussions with some of our customers and partners around that. I think there's always this notion of alignment and the need to have better communication around who we're going after. And again, I think this is why ABM is such an effective approach, because it starts not with us. I'm marketing and I'm doing MQLs or leads, and you're doing sales and you're doing pipeline and revenue. But who's our target audience? Why are they our target audience? And now, which inputs can both of us, marketing and sales, the whole go-to-market organization, the whole revenue organization, including customer success, right? Which signals, inputs, information do we have to qualify and vet and talk about this group? And then the question is, well, how do we go about it, getting them to us and engaging with them? And then it's about operational stuff, but we all have the same eyes on the same target. And we're continuously talking about how do we surround those accounts, right? From field marketing to digital to sales to customer success, partners, channels, all of that. And a lot of companies talk about customer-centric. It's not just when you have the customer, it's also before they're a customer. How do you surround them and make them feel and understand that they are your ICP, they are the ideal? Why are they the ideal customer for you, for your company? And I think this is kind of why the revenue organization as a whole starts there, looks at that group of accounts, and then works their way back to, okay, what do we need to do, each of us in our own disciplines, to support that group of companies' journeys.
Love it. And one last question before we shift into kind of our rapid fire section to close out our time together. What are the tools and technologies that you feel are required to start to implement this account-based approach?
Well, I think it starts with having tools that help you understand which gaps you have in your go-to-market. I think a lot of companies rush to execution and they rush to the operational side of things before maybe asking themselves, especially in earlier stage companies, is our go-to-market really where we think it is? From my personal experience, we also made that mistake. We went and rushed into the execution, but then I just went on sales calls and discovery calls with some prospects and just realized that companies didn't understand what we were doing. We had a messaging and a positioning problem. And that, made us understand we need to address these gaps before we start building anything on top of that. But assuming that you have your messaging and positioning pretty locked down and you have a good feel that you have that process, I think the next step is using tools that help you understand, is our target audience, our ICP, aware of us? I'd say that is foundational, and start with even first-party data. Are they actually visiting our site? It's a fundamental question. Tools like demand-based, platforms like demand-based can help, of course, answer that and more. But I think that's something that is very critical to be able to go and say, look, we have a decent close rate, a win rate from opportunity to close one, right? So we understand that these opportunities are converting. We also have a decent amount of ICPs visiting our site. So now it makes sense to invest additional resources in more go-to-market or accelerating them or getting more companies there. If we are, for example, starting outside and bringing companies and we're not sure that they understand what we do and we're not able to close them, we've built the house from the wrong side, right? We need to really invest in those infrastructure. I think listening technologies today are the game changer. The more you're able to listen to what's happening either on your site or outside, the more signals you're able to capture and operationalize, have it sent to your teams, the bigger the advantage you can get ahead of your competition. So these are starting to become, and Chris, I think when we started, these were nice to have technologies. All right, intelligence and signals and all that fluff. No, these are now more important than our ability to capture a lead, right? In the beginning, we needed that tool to capture a lead. That was the foundation of B2B marketing. You bring them to a landing page, capture the lead. Now it really is about building a world picture of who is out there engaging with me, consuming my content, engaging with my content, and looking to buy a solution in my space. These are now fundamental for B2B GTM.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, it's the classic what got us here won't get us there kind of thing too. I mean, it is getting harder to reach folks. We know that. It's more competitive. We know that. Like a lot of the data you've hit on. One topic, we get a lot of questions about this, and I think with listening, you may actually go back to listening, but how are you using AI in sales? Are there any use cases that you'd highlight as something that's really helpful as you work with your sales team?
Yeah, so maybe kind of touching on that listening point, I think one thing that we've experimented with and are now using at TrendDemon is AI's ability to ingest a lot of information and make sense of it so that a human person can understand what's happening. And I'll give you an example. So what we're doing, for example, is using AI to basically look at all the content consumed by a certain account to be able to really summarize that into something that an SDR or an AE can really understand and internalize in just a few quick sentences, and also automatically score the levels of intent based on that content. And that's stuff that in the past you'd need an analyst to go through and summarize and do. An AI can do that in seconds. So that's from the listening part. It can also help with the talking part because it can help us understand which content we should present for that account, right? And we're using that in TrendDemon for personalization. But the same topic can help build the best next piece of content to be shared. And again, I think these are real game changers in the sense that they're not artificial and they're not just slapping an AI title, but it really is about finding the strengths of these, especially LLMs, if we're putting it more specifically on the latest advancement, the ability to understand content and people's interaction with that content in a way that we've never been able to do that before. I think this really is a transition, and it touches to the heart of B2B marketing, the intersection between people and content and the business objectives. Kind of what does that triangle look like? And AI is a force multiplier there.
Perfect. Totally agree. And you're going to love our audience question. We're in the quick version here as we close out our time today, and I really appreciate it. This has been awesome. But you're going to love this. What emerging trend, the trend callback, do you believe will have the biggest impact on your industry in the next 5 years?
Well, I think we talked about AI definitely as being one of those game changers. But I think that if we're talking about not just technological trend, I think if we're talking about the evolution of ABM and where I personally think ABM is going to evolve, is really going to take it a lower level to the buying group. How do we understand the buying group? How do we understand the different people, personas, roles, responsibilities? Do this in an anonymous world, so as opposed to a situation that people would willingly de-anonymize themselves. We know that's not the case. It's just going to be more anonymous. So that's going to be the challenge that buying group marketing, I think, will have to address. And I think this is something that will help us become even better sellers, more contextual, more relevant, more effective, the better we understand our buying group. And tying it again to AI could also help us uncover some of that without the need to, let's say, de-anonymize people or force them to reveal themselves, because they won't. We know this, right? They will, if you gate them or gate everything, they will just pass to the next source of information to get it from. So I think these are some really exciting agendas, and again, also I think this is something that Demandbase is also leading there, and super excited to see how that will look like. And 5 years, I think, just now seems like pretty much forever. So I'll bet just on 1 or 2 years.
Oh yeah, it's going to happen really quickly. I mean, we're seeing it because everyone's having to adjust in real time. Every quarter, things change, right? Like, it's the world we live in. One question we've been asking every single person who joins the podcast. We're pulling this together for a report, but what's the biggest challenge in B2B marketing?
So I think the more channels, the more people we have, I think one of the biggest challenges is going to be orchestrating journeys across channels, and just connecting it to the buying group. So how do we orchestrate the buying group's journey across multiple channels? I think this is going to be a big challenge and a push in the next probably still years. But that's my personal bet.
Perfect. You made it to the good reads and good people section. So this is the close, and then we're off to the rest of our meetings today. But the first, good reads. Is there a book, blog, newsletter, or podcast that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Well, I'll name people around that. Maybe start with that. So I had some great talks with John Miller, which I'm sure you know very well. And one other great podcaster I can recommend is Nick Bennett, who's championing people's first GTM, people's first motion. I think it's again hitting that spot of understanding that we are speaking to people, speaking with people, and that's going to be the new B2B marketing approach. And I think Kelly Hopping has a great content, speaks with and conversations with CMOs there. So these are the things that I personally like and listen to. And of course this podcast.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, shameless plug there, especially this episode. Listen to this episode. We'll be sending this now. Awesome. Well, one thing we did talk about, we'll be sure to include any other trends or data that you want to include when we write up this episode. So that would be my hook for those listening. We'll make sure that we package that together. We had talked about that before we even started today. And then the most important question of all, how can people get in touch with you after this episode?
Ping me on LinkedIn. I'm always there. Probably too much, but definitely hit me up there. And if not there, then you can write to my email, avishai@trenddemon.com. Super love to connect. Genuinely love it. I think this is kind of how we, again, get to new ideas and new thoughts, working on this together. So really excited to connect with like-minded individuals.
Awesome. Same here. I call these my adrenaline hits. So thanks so much for your time today. Look forward to doing more with you in the future too.
Thanks, Chris. It was a pleasure. And yeah, good luck with the rest of the week.
Thanks, you too.